all, good morning. And for some people, it's evening, of course. Well, welcome back again to our show. And yesterday we met Dr. Gretchen, and today I'm gonna meet a fabulous doctor. I'm sure you guys must have gone through her profile, Dr. Gemma Newman, and she's absolutely fabulous. She's gonna tell us about plant-based diet today and how it affects MS. Well, without wasting much of a time, I'm going to introduce herself to you and tell you what is exactly plant-based diet. Hi, good morning.
Hi,
Sorry, good
hi.
evening.
Oh, it's about, what time is it
I'm
here?
sorry,
It's
I
four
can't hear
o'clock.
you.
Can you hear me?
Give me a second.
Let me just turn myself up.
Yeah, now I can hear you.
You can hear me. Hi,
Yeah.
everybody. Hi, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Oh, doctor, thank you so much for joining us here, and happy belated birthday.
Oh, thank you.
I hope the day was fabulous for you.
It was. I had a lovely day, thank you. Yes, it was yesterday. For those of you who are joining us, I had a birthday yesterday, and we had a lovely family day. I had it with my husband and my boys, my two sons, and yeah, we ended up doing a lot of Lego in the afternoon. No, but it was really nice.
So, but
It's hard.
how did you celebrate during the pandemic? Is everything normal there?
Well, things are not normal, no. So I don't. I tell you what, I'm normally a big birthday lover. I've got to say, normally have a big party, or I have big do in London or something like that. But it's quite hard at the moment. Obviously, nobody's allowed to meet up in large groups, and so I wasn't able to do that. But different areas of the UK have different rules at the moment. So it's been nice. I was able to meet some friends out in the pub garden, and had another couple of friends over for dinner. So it was a very quiet birthday, but it was lovely.
Oh, wonderful. As long as you were enjoying it, it's okay.
Yeah, I did. I enjoyed it. It was lovely.
And yeah, safety comes first. That's the first priority.
Well, I suppose, yeah, I'm just trying to follow the rules as well, got to try and respect other people's boundaries as well. I think that's the thing, is it's a very tricky time to navigate at the moment. No one really quite knows, who's happy to sort of see each other out at a distance, who's happy to hug, who's happy not to. So yeah, no, but it was a lovely day. Thank you so much for bringing it up.
Okay, coming back to our session, firstly, yeah, thank you so much for taking out time today, the first day of the week, and it must be all busy for you. And still you took out time to do this, and people have been waiting to hear about plant-based diet, to know what plant-based exactly is. We hear about vegetarian diets and vegan diet. Now it's a plant-based diet. There's so many different types of diets, and then we have different kinds of diet like keto diet and paleo diet and so many, and it's quite confusing for people.
Yeah.
And then with MS, it's very much complicated as well. For some people, dairy doesn't suit. For some people, gluten doesn't suit. For some people, almonds even doesn't suit. So it's really complicated. So we want to help and assistance here to help us understand what plant-based diet is and what benefits does it have on MS.
Sure. Okay. Well, I mean, plant-based is basically a very big umbrella term that means having the majority of your diet from natural sources, close to nature, grown in the ground, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes predominantly. And legumes can be things like chickpeas and lentils and green beans and things like that. That's what it means. It's very broad. When someone is vegan, it means that they choose to exclude certain things from their diet, like meat and dairy, but they don't necessarily exclude other things such as sugar or processed flour or junk food, ice creams, things like that. And whole foods plant-based tends to refer specifically to a pattern of eating which is really fruits, vegetables, whole grains and legumes, nuts and seeds, and herbs and spices, and then a mixture of all of those things in whichever meal that you're preparing, as well as a B12 supplement. So that is the very basic thing that you can understand by a whole foods plant-based approach. There are different nuances to it, but that is the essential thing that you need to know.
Right. And doctor, what do you think about MS and its diet? And how much do you think does a diet affect any kind of chronic illness for that matter?
I think that nutrition is always important, because it's the building blocks from which you make your body. So I think it's a very emotional issue for a lot of people, because what you eat is so tied up with who you are, your traditions, your upbringing, and people develop some sort of closely guarded loyalties, as it were, to different kinds of foods. So I would say it's important to try to have an approach that fits in with your lifestyle, but also to understand that there are certain things you can do that will really benefit you in your journey, and they won't necessarily be like a panacea for all ill, but I guarantee you that if you're focusing on foods that nourish your body, mind and soul, that you will reap the benefits in one way or another. um, I can give anecdotes of people who have been able to reverse certain symptoms of things like multiple sclerosis, and I can talk about trials where people have really benefited from using dietary techniques to manage their illness. So I think when we would take all of that in combination, it does lead to a really exciting possibility that people have got a little bit more control over their well-being, how they feel, how they move, than they thought. I think that's really important, because it does help to empower people that they can make a difference. And I've had many patients that have received this kind of diagnosis, and it can feel like a real sucker punch, and you don't know what to do with it, and you don't know what it means for your future, and it can be really scary for people, and quite disempowering, really. And that's the last thing I want people to feel. I want people to feel like they have some hope, and that they can make a difference in their own lives in whatever shape or form that can be, and that it can be simple to do.
That's positive. Thank you so much. And doctor, so I can say, the world is actually moving towards diet conscious people. People are getting more aware about what they're eating, their nourishment, and there's also a group of people, if they are diagnosed with any kind of illness, for example, MS, they want to, bring changes in their diet, in their activity levels, exercise, and not take medicines, and they want to get cured with this kind of regime itself. What take do you have on that? I mean, you think we should be controlling our diet and exercise along with the medicines, or just turning away from medicines is also something which people are doing, and that's okay for some?
I think it depends on the person, and as a
Yes.
doctor I like to use everything in my toolbox. And so if somebody is not responding to medications, then it's great that they can introduce lifestyle techniques. And if somebody's enjoying lifestyle techniques which mean they no longer have symptoms, then I'm happy for them to reduce their medications. But it's really their choice, and that's something that I would like to help them with in my clinical practice, certainly. And as long as we've had that discussion and they know the pros and the cons, then the choice is theirs. But there's no doubt that certain dietary and lifestyle interventions do help. And I don't know if your community is aware of the work of Dr. Roy Swank. Is that someone that you've heard of?
No.
Dr. Roy Swank? No, well, he looked at MS data during World War II, and what he noticed was that people who had a rationing of meat and dairy during World War II, he noticed that they had a marked reduction in symptoms of their multiple sclerosis. And I suppose all scientific research starts with an observation, doesn't it? So that's what he observed, and so he decided to put it to the test. And he had in total, I think he had 144 patients, who he was able to follow up for many years. So the first study finished after, I think it was, let me just have a look. I've got some notes on this. 3 years, then 5 years, then 7 years, then 20 years, then unbelievably 34 years of follow-up. And the simple thing that he told these patients to do was to have a reduced saturated fat diet. And in those days, that basically meant to dramatically reduce their animal product consumption, because back then in the 1940s, 50s, there wasn't so much in the way of convenience foods that were high in saturated fat. So that's what it meant back then. And they had a diet that was around about 10% saturated fat. And these patients, on the whole, they tended to get a lot better. He said that those who took on this dietary intervention early on in the disease, it seemed to stop the progression in its tracks, with 95% of them having no further disability 34 years later. Can you imagine any kind of medication with that kind of success rate? I haven't found that in my clinical practice, certainly. And he noticed that those who did increase their saturated fat intake, they did start to notice that they might have some symptoms returning. So it was an intervention that tended to work for as long as people did it, according to his research, Dr. Roy Swank. So if that's something that interests people, then they can look that up as well. But there was another study I wanted to share. I hope that's all right if I share another study with your community.
Of course.
Yeah, it was basically 61 participants in a pilot study that were looking at the effects of a low-fat plant-based diet on MS and the disease progression, the disease activity, and the quality of life of the participants. And of those 61 patients participating, they were followed up for a year, and about half of them stuck with a very low-fat plant-based diet, and the other half didn't. And so first of all, they did brain MRI scans, and secondly, they did quality of life questionnaires. So they wanted to see, how it impacted them. And this is what's really interesting, is in this 1 year study, so it doesn't have the same follow-up as Dr. Swank's study of 34 years, which is really quite groundbreaking. But what they did have was MRI scans, and they wanted to see, did it make a difference? And what was interesting to me was that although the MRI scans of the brain had no significant changes during that time, what fascinates me was that in the quality of life questionnaire, there were significant improvements in relapse rate, in disability, and in fatigue scores across those who ate the plant-based intervention. Participants were able to lose weight, they were able to reduce their cholesterol, and they had higher scores in quality of life and overall mood as well. And, larger studies are needed, but this is really impressive. And I think it's something that, I certainly try to share with some of my patients in terms of data. But there are also some amazing personal stories as well of doctors and dietitians that have used these techniques in their own lives, but also for those of their patients. I'm sure you must be familiar with the work of Dr. Sari Stancic in the US. Do you know? Yeah, so she has MS, and she was able to use lifestyle medicine to improve her condition. And there's a PhD dietitian, Dr. Connor Curley, as well. He did a degree in nutrition and dietetics and a PhD, and he developed MS at the tender age of 15. And he had a sort of a severe left-sided paralysis as a result of that. This is all public information. I'm not sharing something personal or private. He's not my patient, but he's someone I know well, and I'm delighted to tell you and all of your community that he, as well as Dr. Stancic, they both had a diagnosis, a young age, fit, healthy people, and because of their ability to use a whole food plant-based approach, now they are still symptom-free many years later. Dr. Curley, I think now, how many years has it been? It's been nearly 20 years since his initial diagnosis. And with Dr. Sari Stancic, I think she was diagnosed, I believe, around 2003. And again, she's doing brilliantly. So, it's lovely to have those kinds of case studies of people who've been studying nutrition, who've been doing this for a very long time, and who have their own personal experience of suffering from MS and what that means for them.
Doctor, after listening to all these researchers, which are really impressive, of course, I have one question in my mind. There are also patients who have been following, they have been vegetarian all their lives, right? And have been usually having plant-based diet and in fact avoiding dairy because of their personal choice. Still, they get MS sooner or later. Is it because of hereditary reasons or something which, I don't know, how can we explain that?
Well, I can't explain individual patients, obviously, but we know it's a
Yes.
degenerative condition of the immune system. We know it's where yeah, the fatty substance that surrounds the nerve ending, the nerve fibers in the brain and spine become attacked, the myelin. And that is an autoimmune process. And when doctors say autoimmune, well, it's kind of a euphemism for saying we don't really know why it happens. Because that there's an increasing amount of autoimmune diseases that are occurring these days, and there's a lot of environmental factors that are at play as well. And you mentioned the role of gluten. I think that part of the reason why a lot of people have certain issues with gluten sensitivity, increased rates of celiac disease, it comes down to a lot more than just the gluten. I think that there's a real mixture of factors there. So the first thing is we used to stone grind our wheat, and now it's steel ground, so it's a lot more refined on the whole, which means that it's less easy for our gut to kind of keep the proteins that are supposed to stay in the gut, rather they leak through. And when 70% of our immune cells are right next to the gut lining, then we can start to react to things that we wouldn't have otherwise reacted to before. We have massive increases in the amount of pesticides and herbicides that we use in our general agricultural techniques, which don't have necessarily a strong correlation with human health, except for B-cell lymphoma, a few other specific circumstances. But what we can say is that they're designed to kill our microbes. They're designed to kill microbes that exist on the crops that we grow. So we don't know about whether they, will be affecting our microbes within, but we can pretty much guarantee that there's going to be some form of microbial diversity issue in the gut as a result of consuming foods that have been exposed to pesticides. It just makes logical sense because that's what they're designed for. And that can then have a knock-on effect on our own immune system and how our bodies deal with things in our environment and the things that go through our gut. So I think it's more complicated now in the modern world than it ever was. But we can use some very simple techniques to get us back to more of a healthy pattern, and that can be things like more of a whole foods approach, more of a plant-based approach. Things like movement, getting the lymphatic system flowing, ensuring you get enough vitamin D, ensuring you're getting enough sunshine, ensuring that you're controlling your stress, ensuring that you're getting enough sleep. There are so many different factors over and above what we eat that can also really improve disease progression for a multitude of diseases, autoimmune and otherwise.
Right. I can see someone has just written a question about gluten, which we've already answered. But I just want to know, so for example, when we talk about wheat has gluten, it also has carbs. Rice has carbs. But some people, they say we should avoid carbs completely. But through carbs, we get energy as well. And so that we don't feel fatigued and all. So is there any kind of ratio that we need to maintain for gluten and carbs in the body, or it is something that we should avoid it completely if we want to go plant-based?
Okay, so carbs is a sort of a catch-all phrase, isn't it? But there are so many different kinds of carbs, and you're right, we do use carbs for energy, carbohydrates, and all of the foods I mentioned, fruits, vegetables, whole grains and legumes, contain carbohydrates. They contain fiber, which are really important for the functioning of our immune system, our immune cells, as well as roughage and the ability of us to avoid things like constipation, diverticulitis. So yeah, I think it does depend on the type of carbohydrate that you eat. If somebody says that they want to try and cut the carbs, and they want to stop eating things like processed sugar, processed wheat, donuts, for example. Let's talk about foods, in fact, rather than just carbs. Let's talk about foods. So if somebody is eating a donut, they're not just eating a carbohydrate, they're eating something with lots of refined sugar and lots of saturated fats. Whereas if you're having a sweet potato with baked beans, what you're eating there is a whole food and a legume, which do contain carbohydrates, but they also contain all sorts of trace elements, minerals, phytonutrients, vitamins, and soluble and insoluble fiber. So that's going to be a lot better for you. So just to kind of give people an idea of what we're talking about, I think it does depend on the carbohydrate. So no, you don't need to have a low carb diet to receive health benefits, that's for sure.
All right. Okay, I can see another question popping on the screen, doctor. This question is from Niharika, and she has written, I have a normal appetite and don't exercise much. Recently, I have taken intermittent fasting and accept mild headaches, which I have. This is what I can read. So, yeah, she said she has mild headaches, but she is on intermittent fasting. I can see a lot of people talking about intermittent fasting. Do you think this is the right way to go ahead with your diet functions, or is it too much on the body sometimes?
I think it depends on the person. In my clinical experience, if you've had any issues with bulimia, anorexia, or a relationship with food where you feel as though you have to have exercised if you're going to be able to eat something, and you're calorie counting all the time, or you go through a phase where you calorie count and you feel that you have to exercise when you've eaten. These are the kinds of patterns that I don't think it would be that healthy to consider long-term fasting regimens. Just in terms of your mental health, I think there are some studies to show that, you know, people who have had these kinds of difficulties in their relationship with food might struggle with the concept of fasting a little bit. For some people, however, it's a really simple thing to do, which gets them results. And it is a way of providing a kind of a metabolic reset. There are certain types of intermittent fasting which have been shown to improve insulin sensitivity. So it's quite a good strategy for people with things like type 2 diabetes or insulin resistant issues like polycystic ovaries, for example. And, you know, for some people it works very well. It means they don't have to think too much. They can just skip breakfast each day and have a 16-hour window or a 10-hour window or an 8-hour window where they eat their food and they drink plenty of water. So I think it depends. It really does depend on the person. There are some very robust studies to show that patterns of intermittent fasting can be useful for cellular regeneration and longevity. Certainly in animal studies, that's been shown. We haven't necessarily got quite the same kind of data in human studies. It's hard to get. The work of Dr. Volta-Longo is really interesting. He's a senescence researcher, so he researches aging, and he certainly looked at lots of different kinds of cellular studies, he's looked at animal studies, but as yet we don't have the human population studies to show that. But what he did actually do, which is very interesting, he did some research into the role of IGF-1, which is a type of hormone that we release in our bodies, and he looked at the link between IGF-1 and cancer, IGF-1 and longevity, and what he was able to show is that when we have excess IGF-1 in our bodies, which we make and we need, because if we don't have it, we can have issues. There's a population of people in Ecuador called the Laron population, and some of them have a defect, which means they can't make IGF-1, and they are very, 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 very short, these people. So we definitely need IGF-1. But what he found was really interesting about these people is that they also had a dramatically reduced risk of cancer and heart disease compared to their family members who didn't have that same genetic mutation. And these are the people, they would smoke, they would drink Coca-Cola, they'd have McDonald's all the time, maybe. They certainly weren't caring for their health, and yet they seemed to, for the most part, avoid these diseases of the Western lifestyle. So there is some interesting evidence around that. And certainly if we have excess IGF-1 that we haven't made in our own bodies, that we don't necessarily need, then that's not good for longevity, and that can sort of lead to issues. So we get IGF-1 from things like predominantly meat and dairy products. So that's just something to be aware of. But yes, I think, to get back to the fasting issue, I think it is something that some people could benefit from, but it's not for everyone.
Not for everyone, right. I think people usually do it for maybe losing weight, but they want to try it out. Yeah.
Well, I mean, as I say, for some people, I think if weight loss is your only goal, again, it could prove to be a difficult long-term strategy. because you don't want to be feel as though sort of limiting yourself and you're getting hungry all the time. I think if you're having whole foods a lot of the time, healthy whole foods, then you don't have to feel hungry, and you don't have to have that kind of hunger cycle where because then it means that you're constantly potentially thinking about food when your next meal's coming, what you're going to make, and it can sometimes make it harder. I'm not a big fan of diets per se. I think they don't tend to work.
Right, eat healthy.
Yeah.
That's a mantra.
Yeah. And also, as I say, it's not just about food. As I've mentioned before, we've got to boost our sleeping patterns. Even things like, exercise, getting the lymphatic system moving, as I mentioned, vitamin D, zinc, eating more herbs and spices, saving yourself from stress. All of these things are going to be really valuable as well.
Absolutely. Doctor, we have crossed 20 minutes. If you have time, we can go on for 5 minutes more, 5-10 minutes, or whatever.
Go on then, 5 more minutes.
Okay.
If
So
anyone's
I'll quickly
burning questions. There's so many comments here, you guys. Oh, so much love.
Yeah, that's what I'm reading actually. There's so many questions.
My goodness. I'm loving all these little hearts.
Read out the questions, and if you can just answer in short, wherever we can. So the other question is from Crystal de Boya, and she has written, do you recommend incorporating probiotics to our diet?
Oh my goodness. Hello everybody. Sorry. It's very distracting, isn't it? When you start looking at the comments, you think, oh, hello everyone. Oh, it's lovely to see you on here. So yes, you're more than welcome. And you wanted to speak about probiotics. So I think the best strategy is to optimize your own microbiome. Probiotics, there are some studies to show that they're helpful in certain cases. Some people like to use them after a course of antibiotics to try and temporarily rebuild their gut microbiome. But there was one study I read recently which showed that wasn't necessarily an optimal strategy. I think the jury is still out as to whether it's definitely beneficial in all cases or not. Everybody has a unique microbiome like a fingerprint, so it's going to be really hard to say if it's going to really be helpful for you. But my best advice on that would be to really optimize your dietary fiber, because essentially that's a prebiotic and that feeds your beneficial probiotics. So I'm talking about fruits, vegetables, whole grains and legumes. There are additional prebiotic supplements that you can take. Inulin, for example, is one. There's quite a few that you can get, which kind of give you sort of a large amount of prebiotics in either sachet form or powder form if you want to give yourself a little boost. But yes, looking after your gut with fruits, vegetables, whole grains and legumes is probably the long-term best way forward.
Right, thank you. Just one last question, which is, what do you think about soya? Is soya good for your health? I mean, where does it come? Is it in the plant-based diet, or where do we count it? Because there has been lots of debates about it.
Okay, right. So I think that soy, it's originally a bean, and it's a pretty special bean because it contains all of the essential amino acids, and it contains phytoestrogens, which lead to some confusion in a lot of people because they think that it means they're going to get man boobs, or I don't know, they're not going to be able to have functioning reproductive organs or something like that. But actually, it couldn't be further from the truth. They're a selective estrogen receptor modulator, or a SERM, which means that they actually have a really beneficial effect. So they will block certain receptors that you don't need, and that they won't block other receptors that you do. So there's, for example, two main types of estrogen receptor in our bodies, men and women actually, alpha and beta, and they tend to be quite selective in how they work. So they tend to more selectively bind to beta estrogen receptors, which are predominantly in bone, compared to alpha estrogen receptors, which are predominantly in the breast and the womb. So essentially what that means is that with regular or minimally processed soy consumption, you're going to have potentially reduced risk of breast cancer or endometrial cancer or even ovarian cancer, and increased bone strength. There was a great study I read about women who were in sort of the menopause, and they had a control group. They had a group that were given soy milk, and they had a group that were given progestogen cream, and they wanted to try and track their bone mineral density over time, because as a woman has gone through menopause, that is an increased risk. What they found was that the women who had the soy milk had the best bone mineral density profile, even as compared to the progestogen group, and the ones that were in the control group, as you might expect, had a slightly reduced bone mineral density. So I think soy is a really misunderstood bean. The reason I think for a lot of reticence about soy is that it can be used in a heavily processed form to create certain convenience foods. I know that in the US there's a lot more concern in the general population around genetically modified soy, and that being something that they don't want to consume. And I mean, my stance on that is that it's probably related to the fact that perhaps they are more exposed to pesticides than anything else. It's not the fact that in my mind at least, it's not the fact that the bean has been genetically modified, because genetic modification has occurred throughout the agricultural history that we have, really, in some way or other. We genetically modify crops either naturally or artificially, but it's potentially the fact that those crops have been modified to withstand the effect of use of pesticides throughout the year, rather than in the drying cycle, not in the growth cycle as well as the drying cycle. So then they've potentially got more pesticides within them than a type of crop that wasn't genetically modified. That's my understanding of it in any case. But the bottom line is, soy is a great thing to eat, especially minimally processed soy milk, edamame, tofu, tempeh, miso. Brilliant. And I would thoroughly recommend having that regularly.
Yeah, like you said, it's just misunderstood by so many people. That's true. All right,
if you're worried about man boobs, if anyone's on here as a man and they're worried about man boobs, then you should try to avoid beer, because the only strong, naturally occurring plant-based phytoestrogen that can affect your ability to grow man boobs is hops, and hops is used to make beer. So beer is probably something to avoid if you want to avoid man boobs, but not soy.
No, but in MS they say you have to stop smoking, stop drinking. You have to be a saint.
I know, you have to be so pure, but no, you don't. I think a little bit of what you fancy is fine sometimes, but yes, if people are particularly worried about man boobs, it's the beer they should worry about.
Sure, I'm sure everybody will agree to it. Okay. Thank you so much, Doctor, for taking out time for this. Before we leave, I want you to tell about your summit, your Come Alive summit that you were.
Oh yes, all of you are listening. You must join me. It's an online summit, and you can come along. You can dip in and out if you want to. If you haven't got the whole weekend free, don't worry. You can still sign up. It's going to be absolutely incredible, you guys. We have got myself speaking. Yeah, that's it. Give me the love with those little hearts. We've got amazing speakers like Deliciously Ella in the UK. She's a really accomplished lady. She's got her own brand of foods, Deliciously Ella Foods, and cookbooks. We've got the Happy Pear chefs from Ireland. We've got Derek Sarno. They're all going to be cooking up delicious plant-based meals to get you inspired. But we've also got other incredible contributors. We've got Daryl Edwards, the fitness explorer. He's going to be doing some workouts with us, or playouts as he calls them. We've got Anya Garnis, who was on Strictly Come Dancing, and So You Think You Can Dance, and the what's the dance show in America called? I can't remember, but she's been on that one as well. We've got we've just got the most incredible speakers, and it's 2 days of transformation and inspiration for you. So if you've been feeling a bit in a funk, with lockdown and coronavirus and goodness knows what else this year is going to bring for everybody, this is time to feel good again. This is time to feel positive and inspired. So yeah, just if you could perhaps, I don't know if you can pin it, but we've got the Come Alive Summit Instagram page. We've got the link for the website in my bio and in the Come Alive Summit bio. All you've got to do is click on it and then get your tickets and put in the code Gemma10, and you can get 10% off the price as well. So it's a win-win.
Yes, thank you so much, Doctor. And I'm so happy, your Come Alive Summit seems so excellent, So
Well,
many speakers, well-known people, and you are hosting it. Wow,
I am
that's
hosting it.
best.
This is pressure on me, but
That's news.
I feel like I just want people to feel better. I just want people to have something to look forward to, and they can use the techniques again and again. There's going to be some great motivational techniques in there as well to get you feeling good again. And this year has been so full of uncertainty, so full of fear, and I want to bring some hope and some positivity. And yes, I am hosting it. I've got a proper platform. It's going to be a live studio. I'm going to be bringing on all the guests sequentially as their slot. So this is definitely not a
That's
boring
huge.
a boring
That is
kind of
huge.
Zoom call. No, this is going to be next level. So you get yourself your tickets.
I can see people already sharing. Jelly Legs has already shared the website URL and has also written Gemma 10 for 10% discount.
Yes,
So many
yes.
people writing, I'm joining it.
Oh, please do. And I have to say, the website, gosh, this is a bit of an error, isn't it? My website doesn't have the summit details. It's comealivesummit.com. Comealivesummit.com. That is the summit website, and I haven't got it on my website, so I think I'm going to have to sort that out. But my website, if you want to learn more about plant-based nutrition, is gemmanewman.com or plantpowerdoctor.com. But the summit website is comealivesummit.com. So that's easy to remember, right? Comealivesummit.com.
Absolutely. I'm going to remind everybody again. So I'm also posting the swipe up links on my page, and everybody who wants to join can swipe up and join and register.
Oh yes, do join us. It's going to be so incredible. You're going to absolutely love it.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Doctor. And this was, I know it was a short session and people had so many questions. I can still see people sending questions to me, but nevertheless, when you are free after the summit sometime, we can do the session again, and
of course
we can have a longer session and answer all the questions.
Yeah, we can come back, we can have another chat. And thank you everybody for joining in. It's been absolutely lovely to see you on here and giving me all the little hearts. It's really encouraging. Thank you.
Everybody loves you, I can see.
Love you too.
Thank you, Doctor. Have a good day.
All right.
Have a good evening. I'm sorry, it's evening there. Have a good evening.
I will do.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks. Hi guys, it was so great to have Dr. Gemma Newman with her. She's lovely, isn't it? Absolutely stunning. Well, I'm so sure you all loved her too, and I'm sorry we couldn't answer all the questions here, but we've addressed as many questions as we could. Like we said, later on when Doctor has time, she can join us back again after the summit and we can do the session again. But yes, please follow Doctor on Instagram. She's a plant-based doctor, and her website is plantbaseddoctor.com, and also the summit. We are also posting on our page the Come Alive Summit link, and you just have to swipe up and go to the summit and register if you like. I'm sure it's going to be an amazing session, and especially it's hosted by Dr. Gemma. So yes, please register and have a good day, have a good evening, guys. And I'll see you again next week with other guest speakers and more topics to discuss on. All right. And if you have any kind of queries or questions or suggestions, please DM me. Okay. Have a good day. Bye.